Hi, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads, where we are continuing. Oh, wait. I want to remind you about this. So, if you're enjoying the story or any of the other books on the channel, if you'd like to make sure you're not missing anything, you want to click that subscribe button, which is free, and you want to then click the bell tab, and you will get a notification every time a new story posts, so you won't miss anything. Okay, now in our last video, they were talking about the Second Crusade, the Knights Templar. Then they started talking about pure blood and the blood of James, Jesus's brother, and the rumor that Mary Magdalene and Jesus had a child, and that Emperor Barbarossa had this royal infused blood from Jesus, this pure blood. And yeah, so it's kind of going on, and how Hitler was trying to find this pure blood so that he could have the whole World War thing, and a superior race, right? So that's kind of where we left that. A utopian, there we go. A utopian new world order. So this section is titled The Blood. It was believed that the blood in Merovingians' veins gave them magical powers. They could make the crops grow by walking across the fields. They could interpret birdsong and the calls of wild beasts, and they were invincible in battle, provided they did not cut their hair. Pepin, the first Carolingian, lacked the magical powers inherent in royal blood. He therefore sought the church's blessing to show that his kingship came not through blood, but from God. Pepin was thus the first monarch to rule by the grace of God. To underline the importance of this act, Pepin was anointed on 2 occasions. The second time with his 2 sons, Charlemagne and Carloman, to combine. The new concept of monarchy by divine right with the Germanic concept of magic power carried by blood. And this is written by Martin Kitchen, Cambridge Illustrated History of Germany. So some of what we've been hearing in our historical fiction is indeed fact. Okay. We're going way back. Tiberius Galilee, spring AD 39. Introit is the title. During that time, Herod Antipas was almost entirely under the influence of a woman who caused him a whole series of misfortunes. And that's by Emil Schurer, The History of the Jewish People in the Age of Jesus. In all the woes that curse our race, there is a lady in the case. And that is a song verse by Gilbert and Sullivan. Herod Antipas, Tetrarch of Galilee and Perea, stood with widespread arms at the center of his royal chambers as he did each morning, while 3 of his personal slaves prepared him for his appearance at the receiving chambers to hear petitions. They attached the straps of the gold breastplate with its heavy chains of state and draped the official red robes across his shoulders. His wardrobe complete, the slaves knelt and were dismissed by his freedman Atticus, who accompanied the guards posted outside to follow the Tetrarch along the promenade from his private wing to the vast palace at Tiberias. This long walk in silence was the only occasion during the day when Herod Antipas ever had time to think. And right now, he certainly had a lot of thinking to do. He'd already learned of the horror awaiting him in the chambers. The freshly arrived imperial messenger dispatched by the Emperor Caligula from his summer home at Baiae, an emperor, as Antipas could ill afford to forget, who regarded himself as a god. Of all the woes that had befallen Antipas of late, he knew this might well prove the worst. And in this case, as in the previous crisis, the axis was centered upon his own family. Perhaps it ran in their blood. Antipas thought it was a kind of dark humor. As many had observed, the brief history of the Herodian dynasty wasn't lacking in problems of consanguinity, whether intermarriage, blood feuds, bloodletting, or all-out blood baths. It seemed the Herods liked to keep things in the family. This canker in the Herodian bloodline was derived directly from Antipas's father, Herod the Great, a man steeped in his own sensuality and greed, who had slacked his thirst for riches and powers in the blood of his own relations, a group that had included 10 wives and dozens of offspring, many of whom he dispatched with an effigy otherwise reserved for sacrificial beasts. Okay, I guess he's murdering his wives. Herod Antipas himself had once stood very far down the line of succession, but due to the sudden shortage of heirs at his father's death 40 years ago, the kingdom had devolved upon himself, his brother Archelaus, and his half-brother Philip of Jerusalem. Now, with both these brothers dead, Antipas found himself at 60, the last Herod still in possession of Jewish lands. But as of today, all that had changed, thanks in large part to the machinations of his ambitious wife, Herodias. Antipas knew he'd been cursed from the start by this love, this lust, this obsessive passion he felt for the woman who was actually his niece, and who, when they'd first met, had herself been married to another of Herodian's half-brothers, Herod Philip of Rome. Galling at the theft of his brother's lawful spouse might have been to his Jewish subjects here in Galilee, the wound was further exacerbated by Antipas's repudiation of his wife, a princess of royal blood. To make matters worse, 10 years ago, at the goading of Herodias and her daughter Salome, Antipas had actually executed a grassroots spiritual leader from the Essene community who'd done nothing more than publicly call the Tetrarch's wife a whore. And that would be John the Baptist they're talking about. Not satisfied with having a man beheaded to salvage her reputation, the power-hungry Herodias was now at it again, this time within their own long-embattled family. More than 40 years ago, when Herodias's father was executed by Herod the Great, young Herodias and her brother Agrippa had been carried off by their mother to Rome, where they had grown up alongside the children of the imperial family. Agrippa was now spoiled out of all proportion. At nearly 50, he was a desolate spendthrift whose only achievement was having cultivated in himself the tastes of a king. And therein lay the crux of the problem. For thanks to his friendship with Caligula, today Agrippa, the man who would be king, indeed was a king. The moment Tiberius was dead, Caligula, that vile little former dancing boy who succeeded him, had released Agrippa from jail and lavished gifts and lands and titles upon him with the same abandon he would soon exhibit in spending all of Tiberius's legacy of 27 million gold sesterces in less than 1 year. Among these gifts, Caligula gave Agrippa lands that, in Herodias' opinion, should certainly have gone to her husband Antipas, including the sacred land where the tomb of Abel, the son of Adam and Eve, was located, the spot where the first blood had been shed by mankind. The Hebrew peoples had always wrestled with the paradox of blood, for had not their God forbidden the shedding of all blood with the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill"? Antipas might be only the converted Jewish son of a Samaritan mother, but, commandment or no, this injunction had proved to be both his personal test and his private curse, and he was about to be tested or cursed once again. Herod Antipas well knew the poison of power lust still working in the veins of his ambitious relations, not least of all his wife, humiliated that her brother was made a king when her husband was yet a mere tetrarch. Herodias nagged until Antipas sent a deputation from Galilee to Rome with gifts for the greedy boy emperor, an attempt to bribe him for equal treatment. But this approach had worked against them. Caligula's messenger, just arrived from Veii, was bearing a list of further contributions expected from the tetrarch. On this list was something that made Antipas's heart contract, for it was an object that, apart from its surface value, held deep meaning for him and him alone. It went back to that time when they'd gone to the palace built by Herod the Great at Machaerus, east of the Dead Sea, to celebrate Antipas's birthday. Herodias's lovely daughter Salome was with them, still a young girl. Salome had danced in honor of the event, but of course, as Herodias surely knew when choosing Machaerus as a birthday site, it was also the very fortress where her hated enemy had long been held in prison. So after her charming dance, Salome had asked for a favor. The hideous scene still haunted Antipas's nightmares. Even now, after so many years, he felt sick to think of it. In her fury, unassuaged by this gruesome death, Herodias had sought further triumph. She'd ordered the severed head of her victim brought into the great hall where they were dining. My God, it was arrayed like a boar's head on a platter. But despite his horror and revulsion, there'd been something deeper, something hidden within that scene that Antipas had never spoken of in all these years, though he'd thought of it many times. It was the platter itself. Antipas recognized that platter from his youth. It was a relic unearthed from beneath the Temple Mount during the costly 8-year expansion and reconstruction of the Second Temple by architects of his father, Herod the Great. It was thought to be part of the original treasure of King Solomon, perhaps hastily buried during the destruction of the original temple. But his father Herod had always joked, Antipas got a chill whenever he thought of it, that it was really the shield Perseus had used against the snake-headed Medusa to turn her to stone. It was this dreadful object that was now forever coupled in his mind with the severed head of his wife's victim, that gauntly, ecstatic face, the open eyes, the hair still drenched with blood. He wondered how Caligula had learned of the golden platter, and why in God's name had this boy, who now considered himself a god, decided to demand it as part of his tribute. Interesting. So I don't know about the background there, but the facts there are historical and biblical facts. Herod did have John the Baptist beheaded and his head put on a platter at the request of his daughter via the request of his wife. So anyway, okay, historical fiction. Most of that part is certainly true. Just so you know. All right, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.